Hey, it's Ryan Thomas Dalton. Thank you for watching. I wanted to make a video on something that happened to me, a choice I had to make, and that is it worth buying the Sony A7, the original full-frame Sony mirrorless, in 2018? Now, the reason I had to make this decision is because I already have a Sony A7S II, and I just wanted a B camera. There's lots of other cameras out there. I've used a bunch of cameras. I love trying new gear. And ultimately, I had to decide if I wanted a Sony A7. There are a few things to consider with the Sony A7. Cons: it does not have 4K. If that's a con, if you want to shoot 4K, you're not going to shoot 4K video with the Sony A7. It also doesn't have in-body stabilization. Is that a big deal to you? It's not that big a deal to me, but something to be aware of. Great things about the Sony A7. You can throw any vintage legacy glass on it. I've got a nice set of Canon FD lenses, prime lenses. You can throw them right on with no crop factor at all. A 35mm lens is a 35mm lens. My 85mm 1.8 is an 85mm. I like that. You can also use all your other glass if, like me, you already have a full-frame Sony A7 series. So my A7S II, 28 to 70, 24 to 240, 50mm, any of it, just throw it right on the other camera. That's ultimately why I decided that I would buy a Sony A7 as my B camera. Also, I do like the footage. It's not the high bit rate that you're going to get with the 4K on the A7S II or the new A7 III or any of those cameras, but at 24 frames a second, you're going to get 24 megabits per second, and then at 60 frames a second, you're going to get 28 megabits per second. That's not a lot. If the codec falling apart is a concern to you in post, well, that's something to consider. Why did I decide to get one? I decided, again, because of the compatibility with the lenses, both Sony lenses and legacy glass. Also, I decided it was enough for me. I already had a camera that shot full frame 4K. I didn't need my second camera to shoot full frame 4K. In fact, right now I'm shooting 24 frames a second, 1080p on the Sony A7. So that's what you're looking at now. Also, my last video, which was talking about the vintage Ukrainian lens, the Industar 6.1, which is a 58mm f2.8, was all shot on the Sony A7. 1080 was enough for those videos. I didn't need that. In fact, a lot of times I don't shoot 4K. If you're shooting 120 frames a second on the A7S II, why, you're shooting in 1080p. So this was enough for me. Also, if you're concerned about cinematic stuff, you can make cinematic video with anything. It's a lot more about the lighting and how you shoot it. If people can make cinematic footage with an iPhone, shoot complete feature films on an iPhone, certainly the A7 could be enough for you in that department. But again, it's all up to you. If you need the 4K, then you're not going to want it. Have I seen any problems without in-body stabilization? I have not. I have a stabilizer I can use if I need to, but I've shot handheld just fine and the video looks nice. In fact, I wanted to show you a little footage from just an event. This is not cinematic footage by any means. This is just something I had to shoot for an event, and I just wanted to cover it. So there you go. There's a mascot. He's waving. Some quick cuts of the food, some giveaways. And it looks nice. It's not supposed to be cinematic. It's just detailing the event, a quick little video to post up on Facebook. And I think it looks pretty sharp and pretty good. There's just a bunch of shots. I'm not going to go over this whole video, but I think it looks nice. Also, I have some still images that you can check out. I've used this Sony A7 now as my B camera on several wedding shoots, specifically for stills. And I've really liked it. I know some people are considering the A7 III, and then you're like, but I could buy 4 A7s for the price of an A7 III. Well, that's something to consider too. I got some really great shots from this camera. If you think about it, it's got great specs. I mean, not a ton of autofocus points compared to the new stuff. I think like 117 phase detection, 25 contrast points, but that's still a lot. I haven't had any problems with it. It also shoots continuous 5 frames a second. And I found that when I shoot continuous, which I don't do a lot, I like to set up the frame, but when I do, 5 frames a second is plenty. In fact, I've overshot stuff just by putting on the continuous shooting, and then I end up with way too many photos, like 1,400 photos when I wanted half of that. But it works, it overworks, and I've never had a problem. A couple frames may be out of focus. It's not as fast as the A7 III, but plenty of them are in focus. I've also got some great night shots with this. I have a friend who has an A6500, and you say, yeah, the ISO goes way higher. It does, but then you've got a full frame camera in the A7, and it gathers a lot of light. In fact, here's an example of a sky shot that I just took at a camp. No real thinking went into it. I just left the shutter open. Turned out really nice. Also, here's another great shot from downtown Philadelphia. Again, I shot this handheld at night, and I think it looks pretty darn good. As with all this stuff, and it sounds like a cop-out every time I make a video about gear, it's up to you. If 4K is not important to you, you don't care about in-body stabilization, you want some crispy video that's pretty darn nice and full frame, you want to use some vintage lenses with some cheap adapters, the A7's beautiful. For such a cheap camera, right around $500 as of this month, 2018, August, that is a heck of a deal for getting into the full frame market. You'll also see, if you compare it to something newer like an A7S II, which isn't even that new at this point, the body, it's a little less ergonomic. The grip is bigger on the A7S II and the A7R3 and the A7 III. The bodies are heftier, better grips on those newer cameras. This one feels a little lighter. Not only is the grip smaller, it feels a little lighter. It feels almost a little cheaper, but compared to a lot of cameras that are plastic and everything else, it feels pretty solid. Just comparatively, I'm saying, it's just a little weaker than the other bodies. I highly recommend it if you need a B camera. Even if you need an A camera, you want to get into the full frame game, you want to shoot some nice looking footage, you want to use some vintage lenses or some weird ones like the lens I reviewed in the last video, the Industar 61, or something weird like a Helios, definitely pick this camera up. For $500, you can't go wrong. And all that's really missing, in my opinion, is the 4K video, which may or may not be a big deal to you. As always, I appreciate you watching my videos. Please like, subscribe, ding the bell, whatever you have to do now. This is Ryan. Thanks for watching.